Life is made up of experiences. Experiences shape our perspectives and allow us to pass along knowledge. In this podcast, I sit down with listeners like you and find out that no matter who you are, everyone has a story to tell. I'm Ethan Smith, and this is Life Experienced.
So I really wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to to dig, and that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to dig up things. I wanted to find the past and bring it into the present. Went on a field trip to Jamestown, Virginia, Jamestown and Yorktown in 4th grade, and after that, and seeing where Pocahontas lived and just seeing that they were doing active digs, I was so intrigued, and that's what I wanted to do.
Emily Simpson, who you just heard there, unfortunately has not yet achieved her dream of becoming an archaeologist. Instead, she spends most of her days working through difficult situations with children. So what was it that motivated Emily's shift in career aspirations?
So I really wanted to be an archaeologist, and then I went on a mission trip actually to Ecuador, and that changed everything for me. So I had never experienced poverty in that way. I'd never experienced an international mission trip. I had lived in Italy for 2 years when I was 10 and 11 due to the military. But then experiencing Ecuador, and we went up into the mountains of Ecuador. So it was very impoverished. But just to see how people lived and to see that they were still so joyful and they were just wonderful people, it really kind of changed my aspect on life and my perception of things. So came back with the mentality of just wanting to help people. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that would look like, but I knew I wanted to help people. So I went into college wanting to join the Peace Corps or go live in Africa and love on babies. And if you asked me what I wanted to do, I said I just want to go love on babies. And I was a international studies major at Virginia Tech, and took one international studies class and decided that was not for me because it was very politics based and I did not have any interest in that. So decided to switch over to human development, and the rest is history.
So what is involved with human development? Because when I hear that, and maybe people who are listening to this, what do you study when you do that?
Yeah, so I was on the child and adolescent development track. So talked about early childhood development, how brains are formed and how emotions and behaviors are formed over the years. We also talked a lot about risk and resiliency factors in families. We talked about family law and public policy. Those are just a few of the classes that I took, but it was really focused on, I think the things that were really interesting to me were the things that were about resiliency factors in families. And through human development, I also took some classes. Well, they were actual sociology classes that were deviant behavior and some criminal justice classes as well, which were very interesting to me.
Emily's first job experience involved working with children, something she said was very eye-opening and helped motivate her career in social services.
When I was in human development, I decided I wanted to work for Child Protective Services. I wanted to be an investigator, and that's what I wanted to do. And as part of a human development major, you do have to do a field study. Well, I waited until the last minute to do my field study. So instead of having 2 semesters where I could do 2 separate field studies, I had to cram it all into one. And I called every Department of Social Services in the area, from Montgomery County to Giles County, Pulaski County, and nobody called me back. So I ended up taking the first internship I could find, which was with Head Start. And if you're not familiar with Head Start, it's a federally funded preschool program for low-income and at-risk kids and their families. And it was a wonderful experience. I was at the one in Christiansburg, and I was able to really engage with kids and see a very different side of Montgomery County. I lived on campus for 3.5 years, and then I moved off campus to a predominantly college filled apartment complex, or college student filled apartment complex. And I didn't realize that poverty was just a mile down the road and that drugs were just a mile down the road. And the abuse was just a mile down the road. So through Head Start, I was a family educator. So I went on home visits. I'm getting ahead of myself. I interned at Head Start, and then I ended up working there for 2 years.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What was your role there?
So I was a family educator with Head Start. So I did home visits. I was a teacher in the classroom with children 3 and 4 days a week. I also drove the bus, and I had a lot of data entry, helped kids get into doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, and yeah, that's kind of what I did.
So that's a lot of things.
Yes, it was a lot of things. It was a lot of things. And then eventually I moved over to Montgomery County Department of Social Services, where I started as an adult protective services worker, investigator, and then moved to child protective services.
Okay. So what was the transition like to go from working with preschoolers to doing the adult work?
It was different. It was very different. It was a bit of a learning curve, I think. But it was really great for me to see, because I think just as Head Start had provided me the opportunity to see just an underserved population, going into APS also helped me to see that, because I think that adult abuse and elder abuse is something that really isn't talked about a lot or thought about a lot. So it really gave me the opportunity to meet some really wonderful people in our community, and just to be able to help those people.
Emily transitioned into a position with Child Protective Services, an agency designed to investigate and prevent the abuse and neglect of children. While not entirely the position she was looking for, it did lead her to the discovery of her current job. So when you ended up back in Child Protective Services, is that the position that you still have now, or
it's
were you
not.
doing? Okay.
No, so I switched over to Child Protective Services because several of the CPS workers at the time had left. And so I switched over there thinking that was exactly what I wanted to do, and quickly realized that it wasn't necessarily for me. And I have the utmost respect for everybody that works in the field of Child Protective Services, because it's a difficult one. But I felt that I wasn't able to really connect with children in the way that I was wanting to. Remember earlier I said I just wanted to go love on babies, and I didn't feel like I was able to do that because I was having to interact with parents, and I was having to get yelled at every day, and I was in a position of I can't really build a relationship because I am also somebody that is a threat. Or perceived threat to the family unit. So it was really difficult for me because kids didn't want to talk to me. Kids didn't want to get to know me. Parents didn't necessarily want to get to know me because it's hard. Nobody wants to talk with a CPS worker. Nobody wants CPS knocking on their door. So no, I do not have that job still. Actually, during my first week at training is where I learned about the position that I currently have. So right now, I'm a forensic interviewer with the Children's Advocacy Center.
As a forensic interviewer, Emily now works directly with children. So what types of situations does she encounter each day? We'll find out right after this. Hey, Life Experience listeners, there's a great new way to listen to our show, and it pays. It's a new app called Podcoin, which you can download in the App Store or on Google Play. Simply subscribe and listen to your favorite shows like this one, and you'll start earning right away. There are rewards like Amazon or Starbucks gift cards, but you can also donate your earnings to charity. I use Podcoin to listen to all of my podcasts now, and it's been great. You can join me on Podcoin today. Just open the App Store or Google Play, download the Podcoin app, and use the invite code LIFEEXP when you sign up to get 300 free Podcoin to get you started. Give Podcoin a try today to start earning for the shows you already listen to. And don't forget to use invite code LIFEEXP when you sign up for a great bonus today. Over the past few months, my wife and I have been able to save some time and money and develop a whole new set of cooking skills. How did we do it? We started subscribing to EveryPlate. EveryPlate is a meal kit delivery service that's different from others you may have heard of because it only costs $5 per serving, which is about half as much as those other meal kits cost. Each meal features a recipe that's made from fresh ingredients and only takes about 30 minutes to make. The box of ingredients and recipe cards are delivered to your door each week, so all that's left for you to do is enjoy making the meals. If you'd also like to sharpen your cooking skills and enjoy recipes you want to make over and over, you can get $20 off your first box from EveryPlate by visiting lifeexperienced.org/everyplate. That's lifeexperienced.org/everyplate for $20 off your first delivery. Welcome back. Emily's role as a forensic interviewer allows her to interact and communicate with children directly. Here's how she described her position.
So my role is only to interview children. I do not do any investigations. I work very closely with Child Protective Services and law enforcement investigators, but my job is just to interview the kids when there are certain allegations.
Okay, so what does that process generally look like whenever there is a case that you're interviewing a child for?
When Child Protective Services investigators or law enforcement detectives or investigators receive an allegation that a child is being abused or has witnessed some sort of violence or abuse, then they have the option of referring those cases to me. And so what that means is they will give me a call and say that they want me to interview a child based on whatever allegations they are. And then the child will come to the Children's Advocacy Center, where it is a child-friendly space. It's a neutral space. And they come in with their family or their non-offending caretaker, and then I will meet with that child one-on-one in a child-friendly room, and then I do an interview with them that is child-friendly, non-leading, and just a very neutral and safe space for them to be able to share their experience of abuse if abuse did in fact occur.
So I imagine that since you deal, or what are the ages here? Do you deal with children of all ages, or
yes? So we see children from 2 years old to 17, 18. I can also interview adults with cognitive impairments. So I've seen all sorts of children,
right.
Girls and boys, and the majority of the cases that I see do involve sexual abuse allegations.
Okay.
There are also allegations of severe physical abuse, witness to homicide, those types of allegations.
So certainly when you're interviewing children, there are certain nuances that exist that's different from how you would interview an adult.
Sure.
So what is that like, and how do you deal with that?
So I have gone through 80 hours of forensic interviewing protocol training, and they're actually two separate protocol trainings. They're each 40 hours, and they go through very specific ways of talking with children. And because we want to make sure that we're not leading a child into a false disclosure, there is a very specific way that I do have to ask questions that doesn't include leading a child or asking leading questions, and also recognizing that all children are different. Some children respond to trauma in very different ways, and just different ways to kind of handle that situation. Different developmental levels of children, different different abilities. All children have different abilities, and even their language abilities and cultural things as well. Those can all make impacts on how I interview a child. So each child's different.
I know it's difficult to ask about specific anecdotes in this because obviously there's confidentiality things here, but I'm sure that through this process that you've gotten to help a lot of children, which I imagine is what must keep you going, because you see a lot of things that the average person is not privy to.
Sure.
So can you just discuss that and what it's like being in that position and how you deal with things like that?
Sure. So something that I really like is that, I am able to just be a friendly person and while I am interviewing a child about some of the worst things that ever may have happened to them, it is done in a way that is child-friendly, that is a safe way, and I never force a child to tell me anything. If they tell me that they're not ready or they don't want to talk, then that's okay, and we'll stop the interview. All of our interviews are audio and video recorded, and we have our investigators in another room watching us. So I'm never alone with the child, really. But it is nice because I am able to help set the pace that the children really do set the pace of our interview, and I'm able to match that pace with them. And I've had interviews that have gone very quickly and are 20 minutes. I've also had interviews that are an hour and a half. And Every interview, like I said, is different. Sometimes children will sit down and just talk to me, and sometimes kids will cry, and it's my job to make sure that I'm getting every single detail that I possibly can about any instance of abuse, so that law enforcement and child protective services are not having to go back and do additional interviews. We really want to make sure that we're limiting the amount of times that a child has to share their experience. One, because it reduces the trauma that they experience or may have to face, but also it can help with their credibility in the future. If For example, so if you ask me what I had for breakfast this morning, I might tell you, oh, I had cereal. But if someone else asked me, okay, well, what did you have for breakfast this morning? I might say, oh, I had cereal, chocolate checks and orange juice. And while those are very similar answers, cereal, chocolate checks, they're different. And if that was to go to court or, be presented as part of a case in court, that those differences could cause some potential problems.
Given that her job involves dealing with difficult situations and circumstances, Emily talked about the importance of staying positive and focusing on the help she provides.
It is hard because there are times where I would love to be able to talk with kids after the interview and hug them and tell them that everything's going to be okay, and to tell them that they are loved. And I can't do that because I am limited in what I'm able to say, because again, we want to make sure that there's never a question that a child was ever led or bribed or, coerced into saying something. And really, children don't make this kind of stuff up. I mean, there's a very, very low percentage of children that make up allegations of sexual abuse. But there's always that question of, is somebody telling the truth? And I do think it comes down to a cultural view of talking about abuse. And I think people don't want to talk about it because it's ugly, and it is. It's terrible. But I do think that people need to talk about it more, because I've interviewed I've conducted 372 interviews since starting in March of 2017. And of those 372 interviews, there were 340 something children. I've interviewed about 30 children twice, or more than twice. But 340 something kids in less than 2 years, that's pretty significant. So it's happening.
Yeah. Do you ever follow through and look at, obviously, you must have some interest in the resolution of these things, even
Sure.
if you can't be directly involved.
Yeah, so I do facilitate a team every month in most of our jurisdictions where we talk about every single case, every single child that comes through the Children's Advocacy Center, we talk about. And everybody's at the table, like I said, the prosecutors, the detectives, the investigators, the advocates, the mental health people. We make sure that everybody's at the table because we want to make sure that kids aren't falling through the cracks and that families are being supported and accessing services that they need to be successful and to be able to begin the healing process after abuse may have taken place, especially sexual abuse. So we're wanting to follow those kids, from the time that they walk into our doors until, a case is resolved in court. Up to, 2 years later, we will follow those families the entire time.
Emily has experienced many aspects of social work since beginning her career. For anyone interested in pursuing similar work, she offered these words of advice. What advice would you give to someone who might want to go into a career like this, if any, based on your experience?
Yeah, I think my advice is really just to be passionate about it. And I went into college thinking that I wanted one thing, and then that changed a little bit. It changed majors, and I went from Head Start to APS to CPS, and now hopefully finally landed on the CAC forever. But this field is not something that you are going to get rich in. It is not, you would not be joining this field for the paycheck at all. Let me really reiterate. You are not joining this field for the paycheck. It really has to be something that you're passionate about. So if there are volunteer opportunities, I know that we're going to be having some volunteer opportunities in the future, maybe having an intern take them. I mean, get involved. And I think my encouragement, especially for college students or, graduate students, is look beyond your university setting and look at the community surrounding you. Just go a little bit past town limits, go a little bit past downtown, because you might be surprised with what you see.
Social work is a challenging aspect of society. Providing for the welfare of children while protecting the needs of families is often challenging, but it's encouraging to know that people like Emily are advocating for children and helping them through difficult situations each and every day. Life Experienced is hosted and produced by Ethan D. Smith and is primarily distributed via Anchor.fm. The show is also available via D-Sound, a decentralized audio sharing platform built on the Steam blockchain. For more information, visit dsound.audio. The music in this podcast is composed by Lee Rosevere and is used under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license. For more information, visit freemusicarchive.org. If you like the show, be sure to share it with others. Links to learn more about this episode, as well as more information on the podcast itself, may be found by visiting lifeexperienced.org. And for those of you still listening, Emily shared a story from one of her interviews that's sure to bring a smile to your face.
We also have kids. I mean, sometimes kids just make me laugh. And for example, the other day I was wearing sparkly shoes and a child was very enamored by my sparkly shoes. He actually licked my foot on camera. And, what do you do in that moment? I mean, of course, I'm not going to scold the child. He was a very young child, but, you just politely say, okay, in this room, we keep our mouths to ourselves. Right. And, just kind of giggle to yourself and move on. So, of course, we are talking about some pretty heavy and awful subject matter, but at the same time, there are definitely some giggles that happen.
Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And once again, I'm Ethan Smith, reminding you to get out there and experience life.